In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Friday, the 14th of August, year of our Lord 2026. Well, we have massive debt in the United States, of course we know, and it's hitting the $40 trillion level. The interest is now bigger than the defense budget. And speaking of the defense budget, we've got plenty of money for bombs in Israel and for surveillance AI here, don't we? But they can't even provide for the sailors on the USS Lincoln carrier. The horrific conditions there are surfacing from family and many military publications that they've gone to blow the whistle on this. We have suicidal sailors jumping ship. And if they won't take care of their soldiers in time of war, what do you think they're going to do to us? We got millions for flock cameras, nothing for roads, potholes, or bridges. This is par for the course, isn't it? We're also going to be talking to New York Times bestselling author John Leake about his book, Mind Viruses, America's Irrational Obsessions. It really is an info war, isn't it? We'll be right back. Stay with us. Well, I thought it was pretty funny when I saw this article. Is Donald Trump becoming the new Jimmy Carter? This is on Spectator. And I said, yeah, I've been saying that for months, haven't I? Except he's even worse than Jimmy Carter. He's got all the failures of Jimmy Carter, including his failures to deal with Iran. And yet, in addition to that, he's not only a failure, he's not only controlled by the globalists like Jimmy Carter was through Zbigniew Brzezinski, but he is also a pervert with a mean streak, narcissist, and corrupt as any president we have ever had, perhaps the most corrupt president. So yeah, he will be far worse for the GOP than Jimmy Carter. And then when we look at the debt hitting $40 trillion, it's nearly there right now. I said a few months ago, I said, if you look at the rate that it's going up and how much they're adding each week, I said, we'll probably be there by September sometime. But, of course, if they accelerate the spending because of this war in Iran, we'll get there earlier. Looks like we may get there earlier. And what that means is that we've got a debt that is the size of our record defense budget. Think about that. We've got a record defense budget, but we need even more money for the bombs that we have used up and given away to Israel and to Ukraine and others. The Bitcoin is looking at it, and I should say the people who want to invest in Bitcoin, they say, why is the surging bond yields, or why they are not lifting Bitcoin? They're looking at that, scratching their heads, saying, what's going on? You know, Bitcoin has lost 47% over the last year. Gold has gained 34%. Even after we've had the retraction from the mania that pushed it up to over $5,000, the speculators have gotten out of it, but the fundamental value is there. And that's the answer for these people who are looking at Bitcoin. They say the answer sits in the bond market. After inflation, a 10-year treasury is now paying a whopping 2.4%. Yeah, that's kind of a joke when you look at what inflation is, isn't it? Well, I said Bitcoin pays no interest, so the real rival is what safe bonds return after inflation. Economists call that the real yield. Well, here's what the real yield is, folks. It's negative, massively negative, if you stop and think about it. So put your money in bonds, you're going to lose money. If you put it in Bitcoin over the last year, you lost 47%. You need to get real at this point in time. Things are getting real, as they say. And so you need to put your wealth in something that is real as well. The solution, of course, is to eliminate the debt ceiling. That is what the Democrats and Republicans say. You know, we got a problem with the debt. Well, let's just take away that credit limit. I've maxed out my credit card. So let's just call up the bank and tell them to raise the limit. And that's exactly what they do. Look at this post that somebody saved and put back out from Elizabeth Warren. Donald Trump is right about this. She says, this is a bipartisan agreement. We just need to spend more money. Forget about the ceiling. Eliminate the debt limit, she says. It's the only real function is to threaten an economic crisis. Boy, we're going to have the mother of all economic crises with this debt that they're putting in there. She says, I'm ready to work with both Democrat and Republican senators to immediately scrap the debt ceiling to protect the economy. Yeah, this is how bad things are.
Yeah, the only function that the debt ceiling serves is to warn people when we're approaching an economic disaster. We don't want them to know.
That's right. And when you look at the bulk of this disaster that we got right now, as we pointed out many times, the bulk of it has come from Trump and Biden. Trump put us in his first term, he put us on a whole new slope in terms of how rapidly we're adding to the debt. The $30 trillion Treasury market is facing a painful reckoning. They're saying that they have seen a dangerous reckoning by the fact that they have to pay higher rates to people. And so the massive deficit spending, not only of the U.S., but also massive spending on defense in Europe and in Japan. Yeah, everybody is selling the cow and buying the war horse now, right? We've got to hawk everything because we've got to start wars and pay for them. And they've got to go to war with us. They need to ramp up their surveillance infrastructure as well, because it's also the hyperscaler mega cap debt that is flooding the market from these people who are putting in unheard of amounts of money, astronomical amounts of money. We can't even imagine what they are in these data centers. How do they make that money back? From whom? And it's just going to be, they're going to be making a lot of money from the governments that they use these facilities to spy on people until the governments run out of money. So it is a horrific situation here. It actually is insane, as well as evil, what they're doing. They're setting us up for debt slavery so they can spend massive amounts of money on war and surveillance of us. They're not going to fix the roads, not going to fix the bridges. They'll spend the money on flock cameras, bombs, and surveillance centers. That's where we are. I don't like it, but that's the reality. U.S. is set to pay the most for the 30-year debt that they've paid in a quarter of a century. They're about to sell 30-year bonds at the highest interest rate in a quarter of a century after a historic sell-off that stirred speculation that the nation will hit borrowing further toward short-dated maturities. Yeah, it gets harder and harder to convince people when you've got inflation that they want to buy a 30-year bond. What's that dollar going to be worth in 30 years at the rate that they're devaluing it? It's been the highest borrowing cost since 2001. And so raise the rate because nobody wants this thing. That's why they're raising the rate. They can't find buyers. So again, they're paying more on interest on this $40 trillion debt than they are on their record military budget. Truly is amazing when you look at how deep they're going into this. And I thought this, and I've said this many times about Donald Trump. I said, he's the guy who'll probably take us into bankruptcy. He's the king of bankruptcy. He's had a lot of experience at it. And I don't know what kind of a corrupt scheme he's going to come up with, but let me just say it's probably going to involve taking assets from you. For the fiscal year to date, the tally is $1.17 trillion, an increase this year of 15% of the cumulative debt. And so Doug Casey, who is an investment advisor, he's got a website, International Man. They did an interview with him. They asked him, what about what is going on with the economy, the interest rates, the government debasing currencies, manipulating oil prices for political purposes? He says almost all the markets are distorted in some way by government intervention. Currencies have become nothing more than floating abstractions. They move up and down by government fiat. And the same is true of every single food item, starting with all the grains, which provide about half of mankind's calories, directly or indirectly. Governments subsidize some, they put duties on others, they regulate how much can be planted, then they often store the surpluses. This is true of every food. Citrus, sugar, coffee, etc. There are no exceptions. And this is especially true when you look at the most politicized of them all, oil. Now, he says, in a world where almost everything is subject to political intervention, where can an investor still find honest value to preserve wealth? What about the intelligent speculations, they asked Doug. And he said, well, an investor should look for solid and growing businesses selling for reasonable prices. A speculator can keep his eye on all the markets looking to sell something that's too expensive, like tech stocks, and buy something that is too cheap, like commodities. But he said the average guy who is not an investor, who is not a speculator, should probably just buy gold and silver and do it anonymously for cash, and set them aside until the world emerges from both the Greater Depression and World War III that Donald Trump has been put in place to accelerate. That's what he's doing. He said, you'll recall that the best broad definition of a depression is a period of time when most people's standard of living falls significantly. However, it can also be defined as a period of time when distortions and misallocations of capital are liquidated. That definition is most relevant to what we're looking at right now. What he's saying is it's necessary for us to go through this cleansing purpose here. It's like a giant colonic for the the global economy. It's necessary to go through this cleansing and remove all these toxins. It has to be done from time to time. And that is the other purpose of it. But of course, it does hurt us all individually. As we look at the flock stuff, I want to give you an update on this. There is an interesting bit of information from a person who is a cybersecurity expert about the vulnerability of these things. But before we get to that, this is a woman who spent 7 months, this is a Reason Magazine article, she spent 7 months in legal hell, as they say, after the cops used flock surveillance to wrongfully identify her car. This is a situation where there was a hit-and-run accident, and a person on a motorcycle was killed. And because Flock had witnesses said, well, it was this type of car, and Flock said, hey, we've got that type of car that's in the vicinity, right? This is this kind of geofencing searching that they do for people. And even though, because of physical evidence, in other words, there's no indication that she'd hit anything with her car, let alone the motorcycle to kill him, in spite of all that evidence, they still come after her because Flock said she was in the area and her car fit the description of, was the make and model of the car, in other words, of what somebody had seen there. And so we have seen wrongful arrests over and over again. This is just another example of it. We've seen police officers and police chiefs and sheriffs stalking their exes. And we have seen license plate cameras that have been used, misidentify a stolen car. I played that for you yesterday. The family is taken out of their car at gunpoint. The two adults are put in handcuffs while they got a young child and I think a 6-month-old baby that was left in the car. Then finally they say, well, wait a minute. If we look at this paperwork here, the license plate is off by 1 digit. But Flock identified your car because of the misreading that. So we see a lot of those types of things, but this is something that is completely different. This is the vulnerability of these cameras to be hacked by malicious players. I wonder who would do something like that. Would it be Toka, the Israeli company that can hack into these systems and can change video in real time? They can put somebody in or they can take somebody out in real time. Here's a meeting where a man stands up and tells them exactly what he was able to find in terms of vulnerability of the Flock system and how the company went into full denial.
About a year ago, I started formally researching the security posture of the police surveillance industry. Myself, John Gaines, and Joshua Michael found close to 60 security vulnerabilities within or closely related to Flock Safety's ecosystem. We were able to connect to and completely take control of the ALPR cameras. We could view or modify the footage. We could install malware on them. We could view the hard-coded credentials that led to other places. And there was even one that allowed us to track the real-time GPS location of police vehicles. I published a selfie video, literally pulled from one of the newly deployed Flock cameras right down the road at Peachtree Creek Greenway, and showcased how easily I was able to access zoomed-in footage of every single person who walked on that trail over the last 30 days without using a password. Some of these findings were reported to Flock directly, and some of them are now published and flagged by MITRE, which is part of Homeland Security to manage cybersecurity threats. Some of these are still rated today as high or critical vulnerabilities. Members of U.S. Congress have cited my research in a published letter to the FTC calling for a formal investigation into Flock's negligence as a risk to national security. So how did Flock respond to all this? Fake news. The CEO himself claimed that Flock had never been hacked, and he spent his time sending unsolicited emails to law enforcement agencies around the country, telling them that their agency was under coordinated attack by activist groups who want to defund the police, weaken public safety, and normalize lawlessness. This was Flock's response to a formal report about security vulnerabilities. I watched Flock representatives stand up at City Hall meetings just like this one, look people dead in the eyes, and despite evidence verified by MITRE, claim that Flock has never been hacked.
A few minutes later.
Yeah, there are not documented breaches online. There's documented attempts to intrude on a single camera online. And that is like saying if someone hacks into your iPhone, Apple has been breached. It's simply a different concept.
I'm sitting over here fidgeting while your surveillance vendor keeps changing the definitions of data and security breach. So now we're all here. And we could go to the nearest Falcon camera right now, and I will lend you a laptop and walk you through the quick process of seeing if just one of these vulnerabilities have been fixed. I want someone to help me understand, given the evidence that we produced, how anyone would think that signing more contracts with any third-party surveillance vendor would be a good idea without setting up an independent security and ethics audit first. I can't open a barbershop or a Chick-fil-A without a safety inspection.
Think about that. Can't open up any other kind of business without a safety inspection, but you can have Flock without any safety inspection. And this is one of the things that drove Goat Tree crazy. He's retired now, but he would be hired as a cybersecurity expert, and he would tell people, here's what the problem is. And they'd pay him a lot of money to do that, and then they wouldn't fix it. That's why over and over again he says, it's probably an inside job. These people find out where the security vulnerabilities are, and then they exploit them themselves. Think about what he just said. He said, I can look at this and I can find the location of all the police cars at a given moment. Now, how could somebody use that? If you're going to rob a bank or you're going to do some other kind of crime, it'd be convenient to know where all the police cars are, wouldn't it? And, of course, violating everybody's privacy at the same time. But if you push back against these things, you're now going to be labeled as some kind of a terrorist. We've seen this happening. We've got documents coming out, talking points that Marco Rubio had, and he goes down the list of all the usual suspects, just like January the 6th, right? Now, except they flipped it to the other side. With January the 6th, if you were there or you supported Trump or whatever, you were a far-right extremist terrorist. And you're very dangerous. You're an ultra-nationalist. Well, now these people are doing the same thing. The people who are opposing our national security state, the people who are opposing our surveillance here, they're far-left extremists, they're eco-terrorists and radicals. It's exactly the same thing. They use the same script. They just flip it to the other side. The partying on the left is now partying on the right. Don't get fooled again. Government spy hubs are surveilling anti-flock camera activists. The fusion centers. These disgusting things, these anti-American things are put in the wake of 9/11. The counterterrorism apparatus is now coming for anti-surveillance activists. Documents obtained by deeper states show dozens of state fusion centers and their counterparts in the FBI and DHS circulating memos warning that peaceful protesters who are organizing to stop AI-powered surveillance cameras are a national security threat. Just like that. Have you noticed that whenever you got somebody who's peacefully protesting something the government is doing, and usually it's things that both the left and the right are doing, but if the left is in power, it's going to be those fearful fascist right-wing people. If it's the right that is in power, it's going to be those horrible leftist commies that are doing it. And they're going to be dangerous people as well. Be afraid of them. They're terrorists. Anti-surveillance sentiment has coalesced with the activist organization DFLOC, which maps the tens of thousands of flock cameras pockmarking the country and offers resources to activists who oppose the widespread adaptation of automated license plate readers. I've looked at it myself to find out where the flock cameras are around here. You should look at it in your area as well. Their mission statement is that the automated license plate readers are a serious risk to your privacy and your civil liberties. These systems continuously record your movements without a warrant, probable cause, or even reasonable suspicion. Your driving history is rarely confined to a town or to a city where the cameras are installed. It is typically shared with thousands of other agencies nationwide and done so secretly. Once the data is out of your community, you have no control over how it is used or what rules apply. And just like that most recent case of the woman who was essentially caught in a geofence warrant. In other words, she had the make and model of car that they were looking for, somebody had identified. And even though there was no evidence whatsoever to indicate that she had hit this person, she spent 8 months defending herself. That was the legal hell that she went through. And we saw that same type of thing happening on January the 6th, didn't we? And they did a geofence warrant. They got everybody that was in that area. Hell, what's their political affiliation? Oh, they're conservative. Well, let's go after them. Yeah, Lance?
And of course, that was 8 months of hell when the officers had absolutely no reason to suspect her other than the flock stuff.
That's right.
And
that's the only thing, yeah.
Yeah, so these are the ones that you hear about because they're the ones that actually get defeated. But how many of these where there just isn't enough evidence that the person that's being accused of can present to defend themselves that we don't hear about?
That's right.
How many of these things have gone through unjustly already?
Yeah, look at one of the very first ones that we saw, that woman who was accused of being a porch pirate. Now, she had dash cam footage of her own that showed time and date stamp of where she was, and she was miles away from anything that happened with that. But a guy shows up and goes, I've got pictures here. I mean, you can't argue with these pictures. I got these from Flock. I'm here to arrest you. Well, the Flock CEO, Garrett Langley, described the people at DFLOC, the activists there. He said they are a terrorist organization. Now, he got a lot of pushback from that, and so he eventually said, well, that was a mistake, and I apologize. Nevertheless, the government, which is partnering with these people and funding it, and these people are doing the bidding of the government. They just farm this out to privateers. It's kind of the same way that Queen Elizabeth I did that. She didn't want to say, well, these guys that are attacking your Spanish ships, that's not me that's doing it. It's just some English guys who just happen to be freelance privateers. You know, they're just pirates on their own, doing it out of their own accord. Don't pick a war with me, right? Well, it didn't fool them, and we shouldn't be fooled either about that. So the feds are using these privateers, if you will, pirates, to do this kind of stuff. And of course, they're reading off the same script. So you have memos being put out by the federal government, the Department of Justice, which basically say that DFLOC's peaceful advocacy, while not criminal by its own right, has created an environment for violence to flourish. Therefore, it is a threat. So this is, again, the same kind of rules that we see coming from the left. Well, if you say things that hurt people's feelings, that could get somebody fired up to actually do violence to them. So your speech is violence. So your concern about privacy is now violence, a violent threat to flock. The same Florida Fusion Center has also warned about dangerously patriotic language surrounding an anti-flock day of action, with activists writing online that, quote, "The 4th will be a day of independence, not just for our country, but independence from surveillance." And as they point out in this Free Thought Project article, if advocating for a constitutional right of privacy is terrorism, a lot of people are about to be locked up. And that's exactly what the current administration would like to see happen. That's exactly where they would like to go. Trump is no different than Biden. Trump is coming after the people who don't want the surveillance stuff. They're just like Biden came after the GOP. I mean, they're just different mob groups, aren't they? It's the Taglias versus the Corleones. Godfather. So a new threat category that they have created is an anti-technology extremist. Well, I've been called anti-vax, and I am. So let me call myself an anti-technology engineer. That's I have seen it perverted and co-opted, and I'm sick of it, quite frankly. I'm sick of all this technology that's there and the way it's being used.
Yeah, it's the way it's being used. It's not the anti-technology. It's because you put a camera spying on me at my house. I'm not anti-camera. I'm anti-that camera.
That's right. Yeah, I still like cameras. I just don't like them connected into a computer network that is tracking me. The United States has observed a concerning convergence between, now this is coming from Rubio's talking points. Let me just make that clear. So here's Rubio's talking points that were obtained by Ken Klippenstein. Rubio writes, the U.S. has observed a concerning convergence between, and listen to all the suspects here, violent far left and anarchist networks and other violent extremist actors, including violent pro-Iranian and anti-Semitic networks. So there you go. I got the kitchen sink is thrown in there. If you're against these flock cameras, folks, you are for the Iranians and you're against the Israelis. There you go. I guess that settles it, doesn't it?
Iran really hates it when our government spies on us.
That's right. They are anti-tech eco-terrorist movements. He wrote all this in talking points. Just think about how ridiculous that is. That's about as stupid as all the jargon word salad that Steve Pachinik came up with to sell the sting 2 days after the election. And that's exactly what this is. It's a bunch of word salad, jargon, and pejoratives that he's put together. Let's lump in everybody that doesn't have anything to do with us. They're going to be violent far-left anarchist networks. They're pro-Iranian and anti-Israeli networks, eco-terrorist, and anti-tech. Well,
and of course, we are monitoring it closely and engaging with our partners, the public privateer partnership.
That's the rest of what he said there. We're going to address this with our partners. Yeah. And so Free Thought Project says, I can't think of any advocacy moment in my lifetime that has been as widespread and as effective as those who are opposing flock and data center construction. And that's what is making the feds nervous. Yeah, be afraid, folks. Be very afraid. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Stay with us. There we go. There's Lindsay. Spends entire adult life focused on going to war with Iran. Then he gives up all dignity to pursue it, finally gets a war with Iran, watches Iran win, and dies. So that's what should go on his tombstone right there, that meme. And so War Pete wants to basically go out the same way, I guess. There's a Fox News broadcaster who doesn't really have the chops to do this job. He starts a war, calls it Department of War, and he gets his first war that he started. And I guess it's his second one. He started a war with Venezuela, committed a lot of war crimes down there. Then he starts a war of aggression, and he loses that one. He's had a great career as well, hasn't he? So the U.S. has lost 25% of its very expensive Reaper drone fleet in the Iran war. Folks, that's worse than decimated, right? If you get decimated, that's like 1 out of 10. That was a disciplinary thing the Roman army would do to troops if they'd had something that was a massive failure or desertions or something. They would take every 10th man and kill him, right? So when we talk about something being decimated, that's only a 10% reduction. This is 25% reduction of these very expensive MQ-9 Reaper drones. About 25% of them. Taxpayers could be on the hook for more than $1.3 billion in losses, according to the report that came out yesterday, Thursday. Meanwhile, while all that is going on, we have people on board the USS Abraham Lincoln, the aircraft carrier that has been at sea for 8 months. Longest that anybody has done with anything like that, and even experienced sailors. One guy in particular had 13-year veteran, and they're just losing it. They're going nuts, and they can't get fresh food. These are the messages that are coming back to family because occasionally they're able to send them emails or text messages. I guess that's where the military failed. They should have kept them cut off from everybody. Text messages shared with the media by a family member of a service member currently deployed aboard the Abraham Lincoln paints a bleak picture of daily life on board more than 8 months into a deployment that was supposed to end in May. So it's supposed to have been a 5-month deployment. It's now 8 months, and there's no end in sight. Family member asked in one text exchange, why isn't there any milk? The sailor explained the ship's supply runs simply can't keep perishables fresh long enough to make the trip out to the carrier. So the supply ship that comes here, he said, can't bring fruits and stuff because it can't stay fresh long enough for the time that it takes for them to get here. So we haven't had anything fresh but meat because it's frozen. But sometimes it arrives rotten. So rotten meat, no milk, no fruit. Are they going to start getting scurvy? I mean, this is like the British Navy in the 1600s or something. It's crazy. Again, it's very serious in terms of the morale on board. In a separate message, the sailor sent a photo of a plastic container of what looks like cereal, and he said, hey, honey, I'm eating cereal. Wish there was milk, though. Haven't had milk in 3 months. And that's what triggered the conversation about, why don't you have milk? So even veteran crew members are calling it unlike anything they've ever experienced. This deployment is the worst one, and I pray no other boat goes through the same, said one sailor. Even people who have been deployed 100 times claim this to be the worst and believe that it can get worse than it already is. They said the Navy doesn't care. The mission will always come first. There you go. There's War Pete, who has got your back, right? No, War Pete's got both of your arms, as I showed you the other day, as they got people, they've now restarted their vaccine program. They were so proud of the fact that they were going to start to reverse this policy of Biden to mandate the vaccines in the military. Well, the Navy was the first one to reinstitute the mandated flu shots just as they were coming out with mRNA flu shots. And so now they're right back to mandating the same mRNA genetic code injection that Biden was doing. Isn't it great when you change from Democrat to Republican? It makes so much difference, doesn't it? What a fraud these people are. But he's out there setting a new precedent. I was talking to some random dude at the smoke pit, and he was saying that it's an experiment that the government is running to see how far they can push sailors' limits of being out to sea with the worst experience. He said he was careful to frame this as something that somebody else said. You know, he's just repeating something a friend said. I'm asking for a friend, in other words.
And it's been said many times that a military is its logistics and supply chains.
Yeah. Travels on its stomach,
Yeah. This is not a great sign for the condition of the military right now.
That's right. We know for a long time that to keep people from getting sick on board ship, you got to give them fresh fruit. Worst part of my expectations were already at an all-time low. But as usual, the Navy beat those two by going lower than hell. So there's that. These texts add a firsthand voice to reporting from several different sources: Military Times, Stars and Stripes, and MS Now over the past week, in which they have detailed multiple attempts of overboard incidents on the Lincoln, food and supply shortages, weeks without laundry or hot water, and a ship that has now set a Navy record for continuous days at sea. And you know, when you look at all this, I remember when they had the fire and they backed up toilets and everything on that one aircraft carrier, and I thought, is that a cover story that they actually get hit and they don't want to admit that they got hit? I'm now believing that maybe that's exactly how bad the conditions were on this thing. One wife says the Navy kept her in the dark after her husband jumped overboard. That's what the people are doing. I mean, trying to go AWOL in the middle of the sea. It's absent without land, I guess. But it's suicidal attempt. And when he jumped overboard, he was 19 years old. He spent about an hour in the water before they rescued him. But she said Navy officials did not contact her about what happened until 4 days later. In a July 21st text obtained by MS Now, he told her, "I think the boat is finally getting to me. I really don't think I can keep up my peace act anymore. I don't even know if I can finish this deployment." He jumped overboard in an attempt to suicide. Families complained in a meeting with Navy officials last week of the more than 8-month deployment and deteriorating conditions on the ship. One parent claimed their daughter thought she would die on the ship. One woman, whose husband is a 13-year Navy veteran, attempted to leap overboard. He says he's now on a medical hold and he's frightened for the future. She said he thinks he'll get a dishonorable discharge just because he was burnt out. His 13-year career is ruined just like that. That's not fair. That's not right. That's not what he should be worrying about right now. Another spouse, Maria Rodriguez, said her husband managed to catch a fellow sailor before they could jump, pulling them back onto the deck and prompting 3 others to run to help. He said he hadn't felt adrenaline like that in his life, and he was just so happy that he was in the right place to help. So when we look at this shipwreck of a military that we've got, how does this end? Asked Fox News host, grilling J.D. Vance on what he called the seesaw Iran war. Well, it's only seesaw if you believe the hearsay, isn't it? It's not going back and forth. It's not like, well, we're going to destroy the entire country, one day, and the next day, well, forget about it. We're going to be talking about peace now. That's only in Trump's imaginary false narrative that he puts that out there. So this is Fox News host Will Cain. He pressed J.D. Vance, saying that the Iran war is frustrating people over the seesaw nature of the ongoing conflict. And Vance said, well, the thing I can say with confidence is I think this ends with the U.S. in a stronger position. He's about the only person who says that. Nobody believes that. Most people are talking about the fact that this is not only a war they're losing and are going to lose, but this is a war that is going to irreparably damage the U.S. military's reputation and U.S. hegemony in that area. So he said, it's going to end with them not having a nuclear weapon and with the Strait of Hormuz return to a place where oil and gas prices are stable for the American people. Well, we had that before Trump did anything, didn't we? They were not working on a nuclear weapon. That was a lie from Netanyahu for decades. And we had a stable situation with oil and gas prices, not just for the American people, but for the world. They were the ones who threw the monkey wrench in all of that. I like this headline from Michael Every of Rabobank. He says, characterizes this policy of the Trump administration, I should say regime, as speaking loudly and leaning on a big shtick. To paraphrase Teddy Roosevelt, who said, speak softly and carry a big stick. No, they speak loudly and they lean on a big shtick. It is a big act. He says, yesterday saw the regular shtick where the Middle East situation remains worrying, but the markets reacted to more positive narratives, even though the positive narratives are absolutely false. Fake news coming from Donald Trump This routine will likely continue through to the midterms. That's what most people are saying. They think that Trump is going to do this on again, off again shtick over and over again. Speaking loudly, leaning on a big shtick is not going to work forever. And already people have caught on to the fact that it is a joke. As we pointed out yesterday, the Iranian commander.
Not only do these people not work for the benefit of humanity, they don't even work for America. They work for their own interests. As soon as the stock market closes, they start hostilities. When the stock market opens, they send positive messages to raise stock prices. All the while, they are buying and selling the stocks themselves.
War is a racket, right? If only Smedley Butler could see the racket that Donald Trump is running. We've never had a racket run like this before. It takes a casino mafia don to do this kind of racket, and he's had the experience to do it. It is a new precedent from President Trump. Well, we're going to take a quick break, folks, and we'll be right back. Stay with us. I think you're going to enjoy this interview about the mind virus and the obsessions of Americans and how we are manipulated by the government, manipulated with fear. We'll be right back.
You are committing thought crime. Turn off this broadcast now. You are committing thought crime. Turn off this broadcast now. Commit thought crime.
Joining us now is a guest that I think all of our listeners are really going to relate to. He's got a new book. He's a New York Times bestselling author, John Leake. The book is The Crisis Changes, The Playbook Doesn't. The MacGuffin, right? Who profits from this, from keeping America afraid? And how do they do this? And what do we do in response? Joining us now is John Leake. So good to have you on, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, sir. Just to put a finer point, the title of the book is Mind Viruses.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I gave them the subtitle, didn't I?
You gave them that, right? Yes. So, but yeah, that's the essence of the book. The threat, the boogeyman. You know, his face is always changing, but the underlying script, it remains the same.
That's right.
And that's what I elucidate in the book.
Yeah, and let me underscore that again. The name of the book is The Mind Virus, or Mind Virus, I should say. And that's really what we're talking about. And you've got an analogy about how they pass this around. Of course, we did see a literal mind virus with the COVID pandemic, didn't we? And I've neglected to say that you are VP of the McCullough Foundation as well.
Yes, sir. I work very closely with Dr. Peter McCullough. He was kind of a dissident doctor here in Dallas, Texas. I'm basically his neighbor here in Dallas. We've written two books together, The Courage to Face COVID-19, and then we wrote a book titled Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. That second book, Vaccines, was a New York Times bestseller last year.
Oh, excellent.
And so the COVID-19 pandemic response and the above all, this extremely aggressive and reckless promotion of this new gene technology shot, it's the kind of epitome of a mind virus, the recklessness, the sort of wild enthusiasm for everybody, including pregnant women.
Yes,
to
isn't
run
that amazing?
and get injected with this new technology. And then the kind of elevation of Anthony Fauci to something like papal infallibility. He becomes like the Pontifex Maximus of science. This is kind of the ultimate example of what I'm elucidating in the book. But it's not only COVID-19. It's climate change. It's gender dysphoria, transgender. It's suddenly, in the era of Barack Obama's administration, we're told that we have this resurgence of systemic racism. Suddenly we're a deeply racist country. For some reason, we We had just elected the first African American president, but nevertheless, like just all of this stuff, and it's just one thing after another.
That's right. And of course, in your list, you've got terrorism, and we've seen this going in the excellent trail that you got. You began with FDR and the quote, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." That's not the way our leaders operate anymore, is it? They have nothing to gain if they don't have fear itself. That is the very basis of everything they do, isn't it?
I'm glad that you noticed that we just get this perfect flip. It's like, here's this multi-term president saying the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. But then in the wake of his presidency, all we seem to get is, another boogeyman is coming. Be afraid, be very afraid, but, fear not because Uncle Sam, is going to come to your rescue. You just have to accept the suspension of your constitutional liberties, and you have to accept that trillions of dollars of federal money are going to be transferred to whoever claims to be in the business of solving the crisis or defeating the enemy or creating a new vaccine or a new DEI program or whatever the solution may be. That's the flip of this. That's the grossly oversimplified solution, and it's an expensive solution. but if we all just go along with that, then we'll be saved. That's what we're told.
Yeah, you always follow the money, don't you? And of course, you could see where that was headed. I was so disappointed because I had more faith in the American people. I know it was naive, but when you look at this, how do they sell this kind of stuff to us? Of course, they've had a lot of experience, haven't they? We're going back to World War I. We had Edward Bernays, and we had a Madison Avenue. They know exactly what they're doing, don't they?
He's a major figure in this. There's a whole chapter on propaganda, the methods of propaganda, and Edward Bernays being kind of a key figure in the development of propaganda. And propaganda works. It does work.
Yeah.
It's very effective.
Yeah. Something as silly as a green giant sells peas, doesn't it?
So, he worked for the propaganda arm of the U.S. government during the First World War. And then he realized, a lot of what we're doing to sell this war against the Germans, we could apply that to selling products on Madison Avenue. I mean, quite literally.
Yeah. Well, the warmongers are literally selling war, so I guess they could sell us anything. If they can sell us a war, that's something we certainly don't need. So they can sell us a lot of things that either we do need or we don't really need that much, but they can certainly know how to sell, can't they? It's psychological.
Correct.
And of course, who profits from this? We know who profits when he sells a can of Jolly Green Giant peas, but who profits from these types of things? And that really is, I think, the key issue. We look at follow the money and who is making the money off of this.
Well, so the adventure there starts with President Eisenhower's farewell address of 1961. He warns the American people of two things. He describes one major problem as what he calls the undue influence of the military-industrial complex. And then the other thing, the undue influence of the scientific technological elite that has been sort of appropriated to work for the U.S. government's military-industrial complex. And he used the term loosely to reference any industry, financial industry, armaments industry. It could be a whole range of anyone who is in any way the computer industry, IBM. It's all of these guys who are contracting with the U.S. Department of Defense to build this ever greater and greater U.S. national security state. And that also already in World War II, but it really took off, I would say, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. That then incorporated biodefense, the pharmaceutical industry, vaccines. All of this is sort of brought under the bigger umbrella of the military-industrial complex, and these guys have a direct line to federal money. So, I talk about this with Russia. Russia was defeated They threw in the towel at the end of the Cold War, but our national security state, quickly had to reckon with, well, if we don't have the Soviet boogeyman anymore, what are we going to do? I mean, what is our reason for being? How are we going to maintain this budget? And so what you quickly see is, well, let's just keep baiting the Russian bear. I mean, let's keep expanding NATO and violation of James Baker's promise to Mikhail Gorbachev that he wouldn't. Let's just keep scaring the hell out of the Russians. And one of these days they're going to throw a punch back, and it will seemingly then justify our endless bear baiting. And so I think it's important for the military industrial complex that Eisenhower himself warned about. They always need an enemy. They always need
That's right.
an adversary.
That's
Or
right.
else they can't justify just the insane resources and power that they have.
And when the Russian enemy as a credible opponent kind of vanished with its own collapse, they had to turn inward. And so now we kicked off with 9/11 and these other things. We've kicked off the surveillance police state, the terrorism panic. And as we see the AI data centers being sold, I'm here in Tennessee. We've got Marsha Blackburn running for governor. She put up a commercial. I've played it many times. It is, every time I see it, I just can't believe how incredibly stupid it is. But she's sitting in a Chinese restaurant, crumbling Chinese fortune cookies and saying, we can't let China get ahead of us in this thing. So now we got the new boogeyman, China, and we got a new arms race, the AI stuff. And we have to run full speed into this and creating a surveillance police state in order to protect our corporations, don't we?
Well, it's true, and one of the sleight of hand tricks that is made in all of this is, look, there are other nations of the world. I mean, the U.S. isn't the only, and they have their interests. They are our competitors. They want to increase their standard of living, their influence, their share of the pie in the world. It's a competitive world. What this complex in Washington, the sleight of hand trick, is to go from a kind of viewing these people as a competitor. We may not always like their methods, but of course, nor do they always like our methods either.
Right.
But a competitor, maybe even a peer, and instead of taking steps to manage that relationship, to do the best that we can to increase our own competitiveness, just to do a good job, while also maintaining courteous relations, there's always this temptation to turn these competitors into what the public will perceive as a mortal enemy. And I think that's the flip, where we get into trouble.
I agree.
So I have a chapter on Islamic terrorism, and this is a classic management problem. I mean, anyone who was paying close attention knew that these mujahideen that the CIA had supported in Afghanistan, they then became disgruntled with the United States. We knew about Al-Qaeda. We knew about Osama. He was writing essays about his grievances in a London newspaper. All of these guys were known. Three of them, of the hijackers, were on an Al-Qaeda watch list. So what the government does is it totally fumbles in terms of managing the problem with just normal management methods. And the disaster then happens, and now the government has this apparent rationale to, instead of just arresting the guys and deporting them. They were on watch lists. They were on expired student visas. Now we have to have a whole new agency, the Department of Homeland Security, the Patriot Act, extended surveillance to American citizens, wars in the Middle East. I mean, it's mostly Saudi hijackers, but suddenly we're attacking Iraq. So, so,
It was all a
so,
fake narrative. I don't believe anything about 9/11 from the official story. Not a thing.
well,
I forget what the
just,
name of Osama bin. What was it? Tim something, wasn't it? Do you remember that, Lance? Yeah, he was. He had even an American name, and he would go to the Pentagon and visit with them multiple times. I think the whole thing was a setup. But it's kind of interesting. And when we talk about the military-industrial complex, of course, when we look at COVID, there was a very significant military vector as part of that, both in the development of mRNA technology as well as in the constant rehearsal. I mean, going back to 9/11, it was 2 months before 9/11 that we had Dark Winter, which was exactly what these guys did. And they practiced that with war games for 20 years.
well, it's true. And then I'll go even one step further. So Moderna, the little Cambridge, Massachusetts startup that ended up becoming one of the two major vaccine players, they started with the Department of Defense, DARPA, Advanced Research Projects, DoD grant. And I present this in the book. I mean, the fascinating thing about Moderna, it's a little bit technical, but when the virus SARS-CoV-2 was characterized and the genome was published, you had a bunch of virologists all over the world that looked very, very closely at the genome, at the genetic sequence. And one of the things that was observed was this 19 nucleotide sequence coding for a part of the spike protein. It's, again, I beg your pardon for getting technical. It's called the furin cleavage site. It's a component of the virus that enables it to lock onto human respiratory tract cells and to infect humans. When virologists looked at this nucleotide sequence, a lot of them thought this doesn't look natural. This doesn't look like the kind of thing that we would expect to come out of nature. It looks like lab scientists have been playing with this thing. So they did what's called a blast search. It's a patent database of genetic sequences. Believe it or not, you can patent a genetic sequence if you've modified it for pharmaceutical research or whatever. So they do a database search for this critical 19 nucleotide sequence, and they get a 100% match for the exact same nucleotide sequence was patented by Moderna in 2016.
Yeah.
Now what
they've been around for like 10 years and had never had a product that they could actually sell because it never really passed the sniff test, which is, I think, pretty significant, But.
Correct. So the DoD and HHS were deeply involved in the development of the whole thing. Both the virus with NHS grants, with the funding of Moderna, the vaccine maker. NIAID had a 50% interest in the Moderna. So the same group that created the virus also developed the vaccine.
Yeah, I always felt that the vaccine was the bioweapon anyway. But if you go back and look at it, that was the thing I said from the very beginning. I said, so your body is going to manufacture the vaccine, right? And that was what Trump did. He actually set up this thing in sequence when he had the meeting there, and he had all the different people from the vaccine industry. How long is it going to take you? Oh, that's too long. How about you? And that's a little bit faster. He's got them set up in descending order even. They know exactly what they were doing. Finally, it gets to these guys and they say, well, we can do it right now because your body's going to manufacture it. I said, oh, okay, let's stop right there. I've been calling it the GCI, the genetic code injection, since that point. And it's like, so if you're going to hack my body, I'm not interested in that, especially since you haven't even pretended to study the effects on people.
It's true. Well, you said it as well as I could. The whole thing, from start to finish, starting with the development of the virus itself, and then the vaccine. I mean, it's all coming out now. I mean, Dr. McCullough and I and obstetricians that we've been working with have been saying for years that this vaccine induces miscarriage, and we've been looking at the evidence and publishing the evidence. Of course, all along the way, we are told, that we don't know what we're talking about. It's perfectly safe. It's perfectly safe for pregnant women. And I don't know if you saw the other day, Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin then releases a Fauci text message to then CDC Director Rochelle Walensky in January of 2021, saying, there are some concerns that this may be causing miscarriage.
Yeah.
So, come to find out, they knew about this stuff.
Well, to her, it's probably a
The whole
feature, not a
thing is-
bug, right?
Right? Yeah, the whole thing, it's the biggest. I'm telling you, if you look at the whole thing, and I present it in the chapter on COVID-19, it's the biggest fraudulent organized crime story
Oh, I
in
agree.
history
I agree.
by a wide 10x. I mean, it's the biggest.
And when you look at the fear that was pervasive, I joked when people were afraid to touch gasoline pumps, right? Had the masks and everything else. And I said, we've become the OCD nation. Everybody's afraid of everything. We're compulsive in our fear. How do they use that to stop rational people from acting in a rational way?
Well, I have a whole chapter on kind of from the drawing from anthropology and psychology. Like, what exactly is fear? And like defining it, where does it come from? Fear has enormous survival value for people living in an extreme state of insecurity in nature. So, let's roll back the clock 200,000 years. Anthropologists believed that humans were living in small tribes. We didn't have all this technology, advanced weapons, and secure food supplies, and we were very insecure little bands of people. And so the world's a hostile place. So you better be afraid of certain things in the world. I mean, there are saber-toothed tigers, there are hostile tribes, there are crop failures, and you name it. The problem is that modern politicians, the politicians in our modern era, have discovered that ancient programming, that ancient emotion, is very easy to invoke that emotion, to excite that emotion. And then when you're really terrified, it disables rational evaluation. I mean, if somebody ran into your study right now with a knife, you wouldn't have time to evaluate anything. You'd have to you'd either have to flee or fight, or throw your laptop at him, or joust him with your micro. You'd have to instantly react to the clear and present danger. But most of life in the modern world, in an industrialized nation, doesn't work that way. It's the media making fearful representations.
Yes.
And so what the book does, it's kind of a guidebook, kind of hacks for recognizing, like, when are we being manipulated? When is our fear being excited or stimulated in order to invoke this overreactive, irrational response for the purposes of manipulation? And that's a theme that you see through with all of these mind viruses. I mean, let's take transgender. Suddenly you have tons of doctors, loads of doctors, and pediatric societies and psychiatric, the American Medical Association, members of these organizations literally saying, school board directors literally saying, if your child expresses gender dysphoria and you refuse to address this with some kind of gender affirming care, you're going to have blood on your hands because your child is going to commit suicide.
Yes. Yes.
So this is just a malevolent, inducing maximum fear in the minds of the distressed parents. With each one of these, you see this kind of fear trick being performed.
And of course, there's the fear of peers, right, as well, and the profession that you're in. The bullying that is happening there, as Dr. McCullough saw, they're going to come after you if you're a dissenter. And so I'm afraid of my peers, and we've got to do what the consensus is. And I said all through this that we never have an advance in science unless people go against the consensus and question it. So science should be about skepticism. It should be about questioning. It should not be about groupthink. It should not be about what the authorities say is true. You should always be able to question that. So talk a little bit about dissenters and how they became the scapegoats and all this stuff.
Well, it's a huge part of the story. I mean, I can see why you were willing to have a conversation with me about this book. Clearly, you thought about a lot of the same things. So
I've gone through some of the same things, believe me.
well,
Yeah.
so like Dissent. So each one of these things were presented with we are told is some kind of central authority, figure of he already knows everything there is to know. He possesses the sort of final state of our knowledge of this, and from his position on high, Fauci during the pandemic was the ultimate example. I mean,
Yeah.
he's almost like I said, he's almost presented as a sort of supreme leader or Pontifex Maximus. I mean, like the bridge to God. And
I am science.
I'm science.
And of course, the other thing we always hear with these MacGuffins is the science is settled. The science was settled about climate change. It was settled about all the vaccines, the pandemic. Every bit of it was settled.
Yeah, and then I mentioned this in the book. I mean, if you look at the entire history of human inquiry over the last 500 years, every generation has been tempted to think, every generation of eminent university professors has been tempted to think that, we have sort of arrived at some sort of final understanding or knowledge. And then just 10 years later, a lot of their basic assumptions and representations, are discovered to, well, actually, it's more complex than that. There's another layer to it than that, or there was something you were overlooking, or there's just something that humans didn't know about. So to come up to the year 2020 and have all of these people saying, well, I mean, it's a paradox if you think about it. They say it's a novel virus. They say it's a new natural phenomenon, but at the same time, they insist we already know everything there is to know about it.
Yeah.
So who would believe this?
We know that they wrote the novel.
Right.
It's pure
They know
fiction.
the end already.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. They knew the end and they practiced the end. It was their novel and their script. So yeah, that was exactly what we saw.
But now we come to the important point that you make. So a dissident, a heterodox thinker, raises his hand and says, well, no, wait a minute. Like a lot of what you're saying, I wonder if it's altogether true. Like maybe we ought to look further into this. Maybe we ought to examine alternatives and so forth. You know that a mind virus is being propagated when the dissident is immediately told to shut up. Like
Yes.
immediately censored. Like we're not even going to talk to you about this. We're just going to take you out behind the woodshed. So, and that touches on if it's a ranking academic medical doctor like Peter McCullough, the viciousness of the attack, that is a form of deterrence, intimidation. Like, let's take this guy out in a very, very public way.
Yes.
And just massacre this guy, like fire him from his job, sue him, take his board certifications, strip him of his professorship, like annihilate this guy.
Yes.
Now, why the retribution? Well, it's to deter other doctors of his academic station from thinking that, well, maybe I ought to question this. It's classic intimidation technique of tyrants.
Yes.
And I want to emphasize this. The book, I go a lot into our founding fathers. I frequently reference our founding fathers, particularly Madison. And I mean, they warned us about this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, a republic if you can keep it, if as Ben Franklin put it. Like, it's not going to be easy to keep your republic. Because tyrants, ambitious men who seek power and glory are always going to want to take it away. And this medical stuff is the discovery that we can invoke central medical authority, and everyone out of fear will comply, conform, obey.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, that was the thing about the founders. They really did understand human nature. And we're talking about politics. You've got to understand what human nature is. And they were also honest with us about it, too. They identified with the people rather than with the elite. They did not seek to set themselves up as elites. That truly was a remarkable period, a remarkable group of people. And we should still be able to learn from that, I think. Yeah.
I take a pretty nice walk down memory lane with our founders and their vision. I mean, it's not a coincidence that young people aren't taught civics anymore.
That's right.
It would seem that the powers that be, the last thing they want are young people that really understand these concepts of limited government.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so, as you point out in your book, we have now a permanent state of crisis. And certainly we can see that with the current president. I mean, we've never had, and I remember this being kicked off when Obama was president. Everybody talking about, look at the number of executive orders he's doing. Then we had Biden went to a tremendous number. Now we've got Trump doing more than they did. And so this is just accelerating, isn't it? And really the executive orders are always predicated by a supposed emergency. Everything's an emergency.
The other thing, so you mentioned executive orders. One of the things that I highlight in the book is this explosion of debt, that this throwing caution to the wind in terms of fiscal discipline. And
but that's not an emergency, is it, John?
well, we're told that's not an emergency.
That's right.
But what is the rationale for creating $2 trillion here, $1.5 trillion there, right. Another 100 bill here? There's always some crisis, some threat, some emergency that we're told justifies or it provides a rationale for the U.S. Do you remember how much money Congress by statute created out of thin air with the CARES Act of March 2020? That was the pandemic response. $2.2 trillion made with a keystroke, and that money was just sloshed all over the place. If you had a little PCR testing lab, if you were a vaccine manufacturer, personal protective gear, anybody that was even remotely associated with this business of pandemic response made a fortune. And it's all under the cover of it's an emergency. So what do we learn? It's like an emergency is a good thing. Get close to the federal government and hope and pray or create an emergency.
That's right. I remember in August of 2020, I saw a complaint from the American Hospital Association, and their initials are AHA, and I said, yeah, this truly is an aha moment, because they were complaining. They said, you want to take away our 20% bonus? You told us at the beginning of this that you didn't have the test and that it didn't work anyway. Now you told us that if we had a COVID patient, we could just do a clinical diagnosis and we get 20% bonus on everything that we do with them. They said, now you want to take that away? And so it's like, okay, bingo. It's all about the money, isn't it? Right there.
Yeah, that gravy train came in hot. And a lot of young hospital executives, notably, retired shortly after the pandemic, even though a lot of these guys were still in their 50s. Did so well.
They paid really well.
Yeah.
Federal government does pay well for emergencies, doesn't it? Right.
So I have a chapter on the financial crisis of 2007 and 8. And, the pernicious lesson there was, so you got these Wall Street bankers who engage in all this reckless behavior with derivatives and mortgage-backed securities and fraudulent bond ratings and accumulate an enormous amount of risk in the financial system. And then the mortgage bond market just totally blows up, and the whole thing, seems to be going down the tubes. Uncle Sam, first Treasury, and then the Federal Reserve come in with trillions of dollars, and they bail out the financial industry. So what is the lesson? It's like and then Eric Holder, Obama's attorney general, he doesn't prosecute a single Wall Street executive,
Yeah.
despite an abundance of evidence, including email evidence. So, like, what's the lesson? It's like we get away with murder, and we are richly rewarded for committing it.
That's right.
That's the lesson.
They're too big to fail. And as Matt Tiabi pointed out in Rolling Stone, he said, yeah, they're too big to jail as well. That's the bottom line.
So, I thought of Matt when I was writing that chapter.
Yeah. So how do we recognize, you talked about a number of ways that we can recognize how we're being manipulated ideologically. And how do we protect our minds from the emergency? Because when we're talking about the financial emergency, I'm thinking about this and how most of these emergencies are manufactured by them, or it's a novel by them that they've written. They've written the plan in advance. But they actually, by the amount of money that they've been throwing at all these various emergencies, we've got a real emergency that is building up that's actually someday going to hit the fan. And that is this massive debt. And when that real emergency happens, boy, you better be careful what they're going to do when they get a real emergency.
I know it's so interesting that you say that. It's like this debt thing. I was just reviewing my finances. It's like this could be the real deal. Like this isn't some kind of contrived thing that we're just kind of given this magic misdirection. Like this could be the real deal. The other thing is this continuous baiting of Russia. I mean, it's just begging Russia to hit back, really, really hard. Now that'll probably hit Western Europe first, but I was just attending a conference in Berlin at the German Parliament, the German Bundestag, and like these guys are just nuts. I mean, they're just baiting the Russian bear so hard. And do they not remember what happened between 1941 and 45? I mean, Germany was destroyed.
Yeah.
I mean, the Red Army occupied Berlin. So, it by the behavior of the U.S. government, you do have to distinguish between these kind of contrived, nonsensical boogeymen and, the real risk of disaster that is emanating from our government.
Yes.
So a broader theme of the book is that, humans need to be governed. We can act very crazy and chaotic. We have to have a rule of law. We have to have courts that adjudicate crimes and so forth. But the problem is that the state itself consists of men, of humans, so that the state itself needs to be regulated. The state itself needs to be governed. And I think that's what a lot of people have lost sight of. I mean, I would even go so far as to say that a lot of people who are now occupying positions of power and decision-making in this country are themselves a case for criminal psychiatrists. And I'm not exaggerating.
No, I agree. Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, what you're talking about there, of course, is Madison said, well, because men are not angels, we need to have government, but because government is by men, what do we do about this? So they came up with a system of checks and balances. But of course, these clever demons who have worked their way into where there's the most power and money, they have figured out a way basically to short circuit every one of those checks and balances. We don't really have a government that functions like that anymore.
It's true. So it shows that the framers were not able to create a completely watertight system. Well, that's just the way it is, isn't it? Human ingenuity can always get around things, can always come up with a workaround. But I mean, what I argue in the book is that if we, the people, if something like the middle class is educated, is reasonable, is discerning, maybe we could start pushing back against this.
I agree. And I think they're worried about that. I think that's why you see so much of a push towards shutting down free speech on social media, towards making sure they've got an ID for every person that's on the internet. They want to make sure they control that speech. They know who is saying what, so they can have repercussions against those people, just like we've seen against Dr. McCullough throughout all this. I think that's really what they're up to.
It's true, and people that don't have particularly strong credentials or influence, I think there's a certain amount of allowing those guys to say what they want. It's the guy that kind of stands up in the public forum and knows what he's talking about. I mean, actually sees where all of this is headed and is able to, really start developing some kind of influence in the forum. I mean, it's those guys that are at the greatest risk, I think. I mean, you notice it's like, don't get too big for your britches, or else it kind of turns into this Game of Thrones thing where you might just get taken out.
Yeah, I have we had some friends who are from Japan, and they said they had an expression there because everybody in that country is very conformist, right? They're not going to buck the system, and they said they had a saying that the nail that sticks up gets hammered down, and that's really what you're talking about here.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, when Peter McCullough, he gave some Senate testimony on the invitation of Ron Johnson, and he's really started to develop a voice in the public forum. And then in 2001, I mean, it was just full war on Dr. McCullough. I mean, all of his social media accounts were just taken offline. I made my first interview with Dr. McCullough. It was beautifully shot in studio. It was actually quite an undertaking. Put it on my YouTube channel as my author YouTube channel. It was taken down 2 hours later. and that's when we realized, wow, like censorship, First Amendment abridgment, it's on. I mean, we are seeing the suspension of the First Amendment. So this is just classic tyranny.
That's right.
But I mean, it doesn't have to. I mean, we did see certain brave, discerning people that push back against this. But the battle's never won. I ultimately have a spiritual dimension in this book. I mean, eventually you get around to asking, like, there's something to the old idea of the eternal battle between good and evil, because it kind of seems like we're in it right now.
That's exactly what it is. And we're not going to win this unless we got people of character. I mean, that's what's happened, is that we have lost our foundational understanding. I mean, people talk about America being a Christian nation. Well, it doesn't mean that all of the leaders, the founders or whatever, were Christians in the way that you might define it. But they did have a Christian understanding of the equality of man before God and our inherent rights and that type of thing. Those types of issues were also the very thing that made somebody like George Washington value his character and his integrity. Where is that person today in the public sphere in terms of politics? I can't think of a single person that you could hold a candle to George Washington in terms of character or integrity. They don't even value it anymore. And we don't value that as a society. And so I think we do need to have a spiritual revival in the sense that we need to at least value and understand what is good and true and right. We just don't care about truth anymore. And I think that's a key thing with the censorship.
It's true. I mean, I oftentimes think, so you talk about Christian civilization, one way in which I think Christianity, and then just Western culture, even the inheritance of the classical world, where it was manifest in the late 18th century with guys like Washington and Madison, was something along the idea of a gentleman with morals and manners. I mean, in other words, he's not necessarily overtly, reading passages from the Bible to underpin his public person, but a kind of tell the truth, possess the old virtues, behave, with modesty and restraint in your dealings with men and women. I just don't see any of that in the public forum. It's this avid, self-asserting, vulgar,
Yeah.
loud, and what we seem to value is status and wealth. Now, status and wealth have always been valued in human society, but yeah, I think the difference now is it's status and wealth that is not in any way circumscribed by things like manners, class, taste,
That's right.
honesty,
It is the be
integrity.
all and end all, and it's the only thing that people seek is the end of it. And they don't, as you point out, it's not contained as it needs to be contained with some of these other issues of integrity and character and manners and that type of thing. To have a civil society, we can't have a civilization if we don't have civil leaders. We can't have a civilization if we don't have people of character. I think that's exactly right. And when we talk about it, you're right. It isn't about going out there and reading Bible verses to somebody. That's not the job of government. But the job of governing does require character and morality and integrity. And that's what we don't have. So it's a difficult thing that we're in right now. And the question is, I guess, where do we find men like this?
I realize I need to plug in my computer. I thought I had more juice on it. Excuse me.
That's fine. That's fine.
So,
But
so I mean, I would say that you and I, although we've never talked before, and although you've only just now gotten into my book, I mean, I'm always encouraged when I meet someone who is viewing the world in much the same way. In other words, I don't think what we're seeing is just some idiosyncratic quirk or something. This is real, what we're observing. So the problem that I see in Washington, I mean, there are a couple of gentlemen in Washington. There are a few of them, but it's just, I think Ron Johnson, Rand Paul, I think Thomas Massey is a great man, but it's hard to be those guys. It's you climb into the ring up there in the Beltway, and you're kind of swimming around with sharks and monsters. And I think most normal people, they don't want to be subjected to that environment.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be subjected to it. Absolutely. Yeah, it's the key thing, I think, that you hit on when you said, here, this is the first time we've talked, and there's this common understanding. And to me, that was one of the things about the pandemic that they tried to manage so much to create fear. If you see that, if you saw the issues and the contradictions, they wanted to make sure that you didn't see that somebody else saw it. They wanted to make sure that you didn't connect with other people who saw the same things. They wanted you to think that you were the only one who was thinking this, so maybe you must be wrong or a conspiracy theorist or paranoid or whatever. They want to isolate people so we don't realize that we share this common value. I think that's the key thing.
Yeah, this atomization where people can't get together and compare notes, for sure. So, ultimately, we come to the final chapter of my book, and the title is "The Devil and the Great Undoing." Like, what? The question is this complex, and I'm not exactly sure what it is and who's in it, and it could well be that you have different members of the complex who aren't fully aware of what exactly they're participating in. There's a kind of interior logic that you don't necessarily fully understand yourself, but you quickly discover, well, if I'm going to be a part of this club, there's certain things that I have to accept. There's certain things that I can't question. So you have this kind of complex that's running things. The ultimate question is, what do these people want? I mean, a lot of these guys are already, multi-billionaires. So it's not just money.
Yeah.
Is it power? Power, money, but like what else? And it ultimately, the book concludes with inviting the reader to kind of get back into the realm of metaphysics. Like, are we up against some kind of manifestation of what man has perceived over the millennia to be evil?
Yeah, I believe we are. Yeah, I would say yes, definitely. And I think they keep manifesting the fact that they want to get rid of the population and various other things. They truly do hate humanity.
I think so. There is a sort of revulsion and contempt in ordinary humanity.
That's right.
Of course, the other mysterious thing is that a lot of the men that run the world are quite old. They're not going to be around much longer. So there's a kind of a King Lear element. There's sort of a vanity of I want things my way, and a kind of deference and recognition of my power. Even though a lot of these guys are they're at the end of their lives. So, I do.
Agree. Yeah. And how many lifetimes would it take them to go through the fortune they've already accumulated? There actually is got to be something that's there. And the thing is, John, for the longest time, we all have this sense that, yes, intellectually, I know that I'm going to die, right? You can't imagine it. You don't really think that it is imminent necessarily, unless maybe you are in hospice or something like that. But most people don't really come to really understanding that. They may have an intellectual assent to it, but they don't really own that. And now you've got a lot of these people who think that they're going to be able to live forever. They're going to get some kind of life extension technology. I mean, they've talked about that. We're going to live forever and transfer ourselves somehow to some machines or something.
It's true. Or just the thought that there's time yet for me to really leave my stamp on the world. There's time yet for me to sort of witness or behold my power and my influence. I mean, I think a lot of this, to take it into a more elemental psychology, I think a lot of this Epstein drama that we were given glimpses of it, and then quite suddenly, it's like, okay, we're not going to talk anymore about this. And in fact, not only are we not going to talk anymore about the Epstein disclosures, we're going to get rid of Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and we're going to start a war in Iran to change the subject altogether.
Yeah.
But what were the glimpses that we were getting in these Epstein revelations? And it's old men who are so arrogant in their perception that no one will ever know what I mean, just you saw the former president of Harvard exchanging talk of seducing students and so forth on the Harvard EDU server. And you think, this is Larry Summers, and you think, well, so you guys really do think you're just absolutely untouchable, that you just do whatever you want, that
right.
No institution, no matter how venerable it is, you just do exactly what you want. And this interest in seducing much, much younger women, I think that is a kind of archaic expression of my power, my vanity, my ability to get exactly what I want, and even young nubile women will do my bidding. So a kind of satanic pride.
Yeah. Because the fear of God is not in them. We've been talking about the fear, how they try to engender fear in everybody else, but they have no fear, including fear of God, fear of being caught.
Well, they appear to be afraid of death.
Yeah, to some degree. Yeah. But it's kind of interesting. We look at these aged politicians. We've had so many of them who have, died in office. We had Dianne Feinstein. We've got Mitch McConnell now, who apparently, well, we won't go into what his situation is right now. But nevertheless, you got people who do not want to get out. They talked about that with Darth Vader Ginsburg, as I call her. And she did not want to leave. And so they got very upset. You should have left while we had a Democrat who could replace you. But they really take their meaning. Hillary Clinton talked about the politics of meaning. And I really always thought that what she meant by that was that politics gives meaning to her life. This is their entire life. And, whatever they're looking at, whether it's their immediate power and wealth or whatever, or the way they're going to be remembered, it is the thing that really they thrive off of. They just love doing that thing, whatever it is, and exercising that power over people. And they won't leave even as they are incapacitated, no longer mentally able to do the job. And we've seen that with all three of them.
Well, that is perhaps an opportune moment to conclude our conversation, because I have to get on another interview at the top of the hour or the beginning of the new one. The cover of my book, my mom said, "I think the cover of your book is very disturbing. I wish you would choose a different one." It's an allusion to a painting by the great Spanish painter Goya. It's the painting is Saturn devouring his son. So, Goya was very disturbed by the Napoleonic invasion of Spain. I think it was in 1808. And all this war and destruction and firing squads and soldiers raping Spanish peasant women. And like, what is all of this about? Like, well, why are the government, why is Napoleon doing this? And he had this idea of Saturn, the Titan, devouring his children because he didn't want to relinquish power. He Saturn in the myth, he wanted to maintain the Titan rule of the universe. And so he devoured his children. And I think these old people whose all of the meaning of their lives resides in power. It's like what you said of Hillary Clinton, and I refer to her multiple times in the book. It's like Saturn devouring his children.
Yes.
I mean, these people will, make no mistake, they will sacrifice hundreds of thousands of young men if it comes to some nasty war if we get into World War III, and I'm concerned that we're headed that way, these people will sacrifice hundreds of thousands of young people. It's like Saturn devouring his children. So, sir, I've enjoyed this. I've enjoyed the interview, and I'm sad that I have to go. I really like the conversation.
Really enjoyed talking to you. And again, the book is Mind Viruses, America's Irrational Obsessions by John Leake. Thank you so much, John. I appreciate you coming on, and it's great talking to you.
Thank you, sir. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Well, before we start our interview, I just wanted to give you an update as to our producers, our donors who support this program. And I wanted to read out some names who have supported us on Cash App. We have David M., who is a new supporter. We have Joseph C., Samuel L. Thank you very much. That was very generous. And in terms of Zelle, we have William W., we have Adam D., Michael L., Lyndon H., Kenneth C., Susan L., Christopher S. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Jonathan M., Beth Ellen B., Craig M., Susan L. again, thank you, and Rose G. and Daniel C. Thank you very much. And just to give you an idea of where we are, we're just shy of the 50% mark. here in about the middle of the month. So thank you so much for your support. Those of you who gave us support on Cash App and on Zelle. And thank you so much for those of you who support us on Subscribestar and via mail and checks. We put all that stuff together, and that's where we are right now, just about halfway through the month. We're pretty close to being caught up, just a shade shy of that. But thank you so much for your support. And now for our interview. Joining us today is Lenny McAllister. He has a book that just was released today. I'm honored that he's going to come on our show to talk about this. The book is A Venn Diagram of One. And you can find it anywhere that books are sold. I just asked him that before we went on air. It is distributed by Simon & Schuster from a smaller publisher, Frederick Douglass Books. And he talks about what is happening in terms of political realignment in this country. He's looking at it from the perspective of many black adults leaving the Democrat Party over the last few years. And where are they going? Are they going to the Republican Party? So we want to talk to him about that, because I think we are living in a time right now. He had an op-ed piece recently on the New York Post where he was talking about the Civil War. And I think we're living in a time very much like that. Thank you for joining us, Mr. McAllister.
I appreciate being here, kind sir. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that stuck out to me when I read your op-ed piece in the New York Post, you said the tectonic plates had been moving in America for quite some time before the Civil War actually broke out. And I think we're living in a time like that as well. I think we see a lot of tectonic plates that are moving. What do you see happening?
I see the same, David. I see that we're at a point in time where things are shifting underneath our feet. There's a lot of instability that people are feeling. A lot of younger generations in particular believe that the American dream is no longer viable for them, whether it's economically or just culturally. Mm-hmm. And so part of what I wrote about in that commemorative edition back during America 250 was that we've gone through these periods of time before. And if we can have faith both in our spiritual sense, faith in God, faith in what we worship and what we believe in regardless of denomination, mm-hmm. but also secular faith in America, in the American dream, in our resilience to be better as a nation, to be a more perfect union with each generation. If we can have those two lanes in faith and stay on that path, that combined path of faith, we can get past the division, we can get past our current malaise, and we can be the next iteration of a more perfect union in the days ahead.
That's right. What we do is we keep the stuff that worked and we try to get rid of the things that don't belong there.
Exactly.
And it's an incremental thing rather than a revolution. I'm concerned that we're going to have a revolution, though. Talk a little bit about what happens with the black adults that have left the Democrat Party. You said they didn't become Republicans, they just left. So what are they doing?
They're looking for solutions. Uh-huh. They're looking for solutions like all other Americans are. They want to see solutions that work for them. They want to see politicians that represent them on a regular basis, and they want to be able to feel as though they're back in a partnership. This is supposed to be a representative form of government, but people are feeling more and more detached from the political leaders that they elect. So African Americans, much like younger generations of Americans, regardless of their color or creed, they're looking for representative government that's going to represent their needs, represent their vision, and represent where they want the country to go moving forward.
I agree. Yeah, they're increasingly looking predatory as opposed to partnership as you look at it. You know, you start with a quote from Frederick Douglass, the 4th of July quote, the very famous one from Frederick Douglass. You know, when we talk about different parties and independence, I talked earlier today to Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai, and he was talking about the fact that in Massachusetts, where he's running for office, he said 67% of the people there identify as independents. He said, we think of it as a blue state, but it's only really about 20 some odd percentage of people that identify as Democrats, and the Republicans are in single digits. But he said 67% of the people are independents. Is that what you're seeing in the black community?
We're seeing that all across America, not just the black community, but in the exhausted middle, those American voters that I wrote a Venn diagram of one for. Let's go back to Massachusetts for just a second. People forget that if you look at several of the last gubernatorial administrations, they were Republican. Despite what we think of as a blue state in regards to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. People just want solutions. And as we are realizing, there's an exhausted middle in America. People that are tired of the partisan fighting, they want political and policy solutions, and they want leadership regardless of what the partisan label is. The most expansive part of our electorate these days are those that are identifying as independent voters. And they're doing that because they're sick of the partisan fighting. They're looking for solutions. And that's part of what I wrote about in a Venn diagram of one. We need more people that are statesmen and leaders that can talk to all factions of our country.
Now, when we're talking about a Venn diagram of one, what are you referring to? I mean, I usually look at it as a uniparty on so many different critical issues. Of course, there are legitimate differences between Republicans and Democrats, but on so many vital issues, we seem to have a Venn diagram of one. But you probably meant something else by that. Tell us what you meant by it.
That Venn diagram where we overlap, where there are certain common values that we have as Americans that have been around for 250 years, regardless of color or creed, regardless if you're East Coaster, West Coaster, or you're in quote-unquote flyover country. Mm-hmm. That Venn diagram describes not only my life experience with all the different things that I've done, from the RNC and the Tea Party to the NAACP and Rainbow Push Coalition, while keeping my principles in place, but it also defines America. We are an overlapping of cultures from Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Africa, Central America, Asia. They've come together, and with each generation of Americans, we have redefined what American means while also keeping these core values of liberty and freedom in place so that people can have that pursuit of happiness that our founding documents promised us.
Yes, and so, of course, when we talk about it, the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and you began your piece there with a quote from Frederick Douglass on the 250th anniversary. It's a great document. Unfortunately, I can't find myself in there. When we look at that, what are the core principles as you see it for this country?
The ones that I talked about, us going back to an Venn diagram of one, and again, books available today, and thank you for having me here to talk about it, are three in particular: security, empowerment, and opportunity. Security in one's citizenship, security in one's personhood, and security in one's potential to pursue happiness as they see fit. Empowerment. Empowerment through education, knowledge of self as a child of God, and then academic knowledge. Entrepreneurial empowerment, the ability to invent and reinvent oneself in order to continue to pursue happiness. And then economic empowerment as well, to be able to participate in free market principles in our society. And then, of course, opportunity, the ability to hope, act, and pivot. You can hope for something better, you can act upon a plan, and then you can pivot if the first, second, or third plan doesn't work. David, we have forgotten that America is a second act nation. It's full of biographies of people that did not succeed with their first time around, but through a second act made America better. Everybody from George Washington to Abraham Lincoln to the everyday people in our communities have gone through first and second acts in politics, business, academia, and the like. And because we have facilitated that, America's gotten better. We have to get back to those principles to allow people to have second acts to move through these divisions in these contemporary times to be better moving ahead.
I agree. I see, when I look at it, though, I kind of back from cheering for government because it seems like in so many different ways they're shutting down those opportunities for us, whether it's a second act or even a first act. We've got doors that are being closed as they seem to want to exercise absolute total control over everything that we do, watching everything that we do. What do we do about that? To me, that seems to be the vital issue. Maybe you don't see it that way. What do you see in terms of obstructing our ability to have a second act or even a first act? How do we open up that liberty that's there?
We remember that the Constitution is protecting God-given rights. It's not granting anything. It's protecting God-given rights. And so when we remember what the purpose of the Constitution is, and that who the author of those rights really is, we can then lean on our faith. We can lean on the spiritual faith because we know who the absolute author is. But we can also lean on our secular faith that we have constitutional protections that allow us to be the authors of our lives. us to be the ones that are writing the chapters of our story, our individual story, but then combined together into the American story. That's what we have to get back to. We don't need more government getting in the way of that. We need government understanding its place and its purpose so that we can craft those stories ourselves and be successful therein.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I talked a little bit this last week about Dinesh D'Souza in terms of an op-ed piece that he just recently put out. And he was trying to defend the founders from the charges of hypocrisy because they were talking about independence and liberty, and yet they were not focused on slavery. And that is something I see a lot of conservatives do. And yet the reality is that what they were trying to do at that point in time, certainly many of them were involved hypocritically in slavery. But as Jefferson said, we got a wolf by the ears. What do we do to undo this institution that we inherited? And how do we do that without a major upheaval? Well, they didn't find a way to do it without a major upheaval. But nevertheless, when you look at what the intention of the Declaration of Independence was, they neither had the authority to free any slaves. It was really about trying to free themselves from government that was oppressive. And that was the first step. You first have got to get government away, and then you can start to move to other areas. It seems like where we are right now, we have a government that desires, whether you're looking at the Republicans or Democrats, it seems like there's an overreaching desire to watch and to control everything that we do. And it seems to me like there's an unholy alliance between government and major, and I'm talking about major corporations. I'm not anti-business. I'm certainly not anti-free market, but I'm against crony capitalism. And so when I look at this, I see this connection to between government and corporations that I find very troubling because they outsource so many of the things that they're prohibited from doing to government, to corporations, and say, well, that's not us doing it, it's the corporations doing it. How do you see that? Or do you see it that way?
We have to get back to trusting the American people again, David. When you trust the American people, then you trust the free market. If you trust the American people, then you trust the communities of America more than you trust American government, whether it's local, state, or federal. We don't trust the American people the way we used to. And just the same, the American people have a jaundiced side towards government because both have been put in lanes that do not belong to them. We have to get government back in its own lane again. It has to be able to be a guiding force, a protector of rights, not one that deems rights or designates rights or sets the rules. Just the same, we have to go back to trusting the American people and saying, we're going to give you the empowerment necessary to find your way in America. Define your definition of the American dream. And there are plenty of different ways to define it, but we're not going to get in the way of it. As long as you don't infringe upon somebody else's property or somebody else's quality of life in regards to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of their own, we're going to empower you along the way. We have stopped doing that. We have to get back to the trust of the American people. And in a Venn diagram of one, I remind us that when we do that, whether you've been a poor kid that grew up during the Jim Crow era of the South, or you grew up in the western part of the United States as an Asian American immigrant, you can find the American dream. But you have to make sure that those protections are in place and everybody understands their true role in the American fabric.
I agree. And when I think it comes to getting government back into its lane, I think its lane is to protect our God-given liberties. That's what the Declaration of Independence said. I really believe that is a wise position for the government. When we look at what the government is doing, one of the things that, as you're talking about this, we have to trust the American people. I think that is the key issue when we talk about freedom of speech. We have so many people who are so upset about social media. And it's like, well, look, if people are free to say whatever they want, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to say things that you don't like. Just grow up and deal with it, or go out there and debate them if you really don't like what they're having to say. But to me, free speech is really about trusting the American people to be able to sort out what is true and what is false and what is loving and what is hateful or whatever. We don't need the government to do that type of thing. What we need the government to do is to make sure that corporations aren't going to restrict that. And in many cases, we have the government is essentially behind the scenes telling the social media companies to shut it down. What do you think about that?
I think that we have to get back to faith. The guiding principle of who we are. So what we need to get back to is this. We need to get back to a point in time where faith comes into play and guides our principles and how we do things. The Bill of Rights, those rights that are enjoined in the Bill of Rights, including freedom of speech. Corporations are not supposed to be guiding our ethics and our morality when it comes to that. It's supposed to be our individual faith in God, but also in what America is supposed to be. When we have a healthy faith and it's a strong faith, we can self-police ourselves. We can have really tough and robust debates, but still stay within pocket. When we're counting on another institution to provide those guardrails for us, one, we are no longer empowered, and number two, the rules are being dictated to us. That is not what America is supposed to be. But we have to strengthen our faith, spiritually and secularly, in order to find those guardrails once again so that we can move down the path together once again.
Well, I agree with that. So when you look at the third party that Tucker Carlson is talking about, for example, have you looked at his 10-point manifesto? Do you have any opinion about that? It's kind of generalized, but what do you think about that? And what do you think about the opportunity for a third party? We have so many people who are registered now as independent, so many people who, as you pointed out, you got a lot of the black community and a lot of people of every community who have left one party or the other, and they're essentially politically homeless, and they don't want to be associated with either one of the two parties. Many of them would like to have a third party. What do you think about what Tucker Carlson and company are doing with that?
Very directly, David, we have to bring politics back to the people. It can no longer be for big money. It can no longer be for only the affluent. We have to bring politics back to the people. Once we do that, whether it's a third party, a fourth party, a fifth party, we'll be able to get a higher level of talent back into politics. We'll have more competitive elections rather than these gerrymandered districts where we already know the outcome months in advance. And we'll be able to then substantively have real debates over what are the policy solutions that will defend liberty, but also solve the problem. If you have solutions that solve the problem and infringe upon liberty, it's still a problem. You need talented statesmen, talented leaders that can protect liberty and solve the problem. And the way to do that is to start bringing politics back to the people, where the people mean more than the money in politics.
I agree. Yeah, unfortunately, we're kind of we're out of stock on statesmen, I think, at this point in time in our country.
But David, here's the truth. If you look back at the 1830s, 40s, and 50s, we didn't have a lot of statesmen back then. We had a dearth of statesmanship. And then by the time you got to the 1860s, you had abolitionists, you had Lincoln, you had the radical Republicans, you had others that were fighting for a better America. You look back at the 1920s going into the Great Depression. We didn't have a whole lot of statesmanship then. Then you had FDR and other leaders emerging. Same with the Civil Rights era. Same with going from the 70s and the malaise going into the 1980s with Reagan and the Reagan Revolution, the Republican Revolution, and the different era of the 90s. So we are going through that iteration again. Statesmanship will come back into vogue. Leadership will come back into vogue, because if there's anything we've been able to count on for 250 years in America, is that statesmanship and leadership will come back into vogue.
Well, yeah, nature hates a vacuum, and we certainly got a vacuum in Washington right now. We got a giant sucking sound, I guess, as Ross Perot called it, but it's not just about money or manufacturing. It's really about character and statesmanship. And so, yeah, somebody will step into that vacuum. I agree with you about that. Well, very interesting concept, a Venn diagram of one. And again, you can find that book wherever any books are sold. And thank you so much for joining us. The author is Lenny McAllister. Thank you, Lenny. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, David. You have a wonderful day, and God bless you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye. The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. but each of us has worth and dignity, created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.